Hello and welcome to In Focus Maine. I'm your host, Robert Guadarrama. Thanks for joining us. This week we are in beautiful Old Orchard Beach. The normally bustling tourist town has felt the impact of tariff tensions. The area's Chamber of Commerce estimates about 30 to 40% of the town's revenue comes from Canadian tourists. But this year, hotels like the Point of View Inn say reservations are way down. Over the next half hour, we'll explore the economic impact the trade war is having on the state, its businesses, and its people. Joining us now is Assistant House Majority Leader Lori Gramlich, who represents Old Orchard Beach. This is your hometown, Old Orchard Beach.
It is.
What makes it so special?
It's the community. It's all about the community. We've got businesses that have been here for generations. We get visitors that come back all the time. It's a small town. It's a small hometown feel, and I love that. I had lived in Portland for a number of years, and Portland's fantastic, but it's really nice to be in a small, close-knit community.
Sure. And tell me about the tourism here, because it clearly is a large draw for Canadians. Why is that?
Canadians have been coming here for generations. You know, particularly people from Quebec, they can come and have our beautiful ocean, miles of ocean, sandy beach, warmer weather. Some of us in Maine might not think it's so warm, but our Canadian friends love it because it's a little bit warmer. And there's so much for them to do. You know, we're walking by Palace Playland right now. It's a great place. I think it's one of the only amusement parks on the ocean, I think, in the United States, which is pretty cool. So it's very family oriented. There's all kinds of activities to do with kids, which is fantastic. So if you're looking for a family fun vacation and you've got kids, Old Orchard Beach is one of the prime destination spots to come to.
It's also relaxing.
Yeah.
I just love sitting on
Yes.
on a porch and
Yes.
smelling the ocean breeze.
Well, it's amazing because, you know, I live about a half a mile from the ocean, and sometimes at night in the summertime when my windows are open, I can hear the waves. I can hear the ocean, and it's very soothing.
Absolutely.
There's really something for me, and I'm sure many who come here, there's something really special about being by the beach, being by the sea, being by the ocean. It's really grounding for me.
Sure. Let's talk a little about the tariffs, because there's a lot of fear right now among business owners in this community that Canadians won't be coming in the numbers that they have been accustomed to. What are you hearing and what are you feeling about that?
You know, I've heard from some business owners, mostly lodging, business owners who are concerned because we realize about 40% of our tourism are from our Canadian friends. And there has been, unfortunately, a bit of a significant drop in reservations and certainly a rise in cancellations. So it's a little unsettling and it's unpredictable. I think we're going to get through it. I think we're going to get by it. We did during the COVID years, really. And I think we're going to be okay here, but it's just going to be a matter of waiting and seeing, I think.
Yeah. What is your message to our friends to the north in this time of, souring relations?
You know, it's easier said than done sometimes, but I think it's really important, if we're able to, is to try to, keep the bigger picture government stuff maybe out of it and to really focus in on the relationships that we have. We've had Canadians coming here for generations. It's about relationship. And what I want to say to our Canadian friends, please come back. We love you. We can't wait for you to be here. And we know you love it too. And hopefully we can have a pretty robust summer with them enjoying our beautiful beach.
So tell me, how critical is tourism to Old Orchard Beach?
It's extraordinarily critical. As I've mentioned, we get somewhere in the neighborhood of about 40% of our Canadian tourists coming here, which makes up for somewhere in the neighborhood of about $500 million, which is, across the state is huge. We are a seasonal town. So our season just started last weekend on Memorial Day, and we've got a few short weeks to really have business owners make their money. And it's a huge economic driver. By the time Labor Day comes, people are going home. We might have some leaf peepers coming out in September and October, but for the most part, we've got a few short months in the summer to have business owners really earn their bread and butter.
Right. And are you hearing from business owners that they are concerned that this summer may not be as busy as years past?
People are worried, and I think they've got some, quite frankly, healthy anxiety about it because they've seen, just based on numbers from last year at this time to this year, they've seen their numbers decrease. And they don't know what's going to happen until it happens. So they're trying to make it up. I mean, I know there's been businesses that have really broadened their scope in terms of, where we got 40% of our visitors coming from Canada, for example, and then certainly we've got our New England states that have come. Maybe we need to look at states like as far down as Pennsylvania and Ohio. I know there's one business owner that has really put the word out and done some really innovative marketing and has gotten calls from people all over the country to talk about, Maine has always been on my bucket list, but now I'm going to come, and I'm going to come to Old Orchard Beach. So that's fantastic.
Right, so they're thinking outside the box.
Yes.
They're really trying to figure out a way to make this work because they can't operate at 50% capacity or 50% less business.
No, absolutely not. And I think it is incumbent upon really all of us to try to do some innovative outside the box thinking. When you've been doing something for a long time, and particularly in this town, this is generational. So there have been people coming to this community literally for like 5, 6, 7 generations. So business owners get really comfortable with that as well. And so when you've been doing things and the train's on the tracks and it's running well, no need to change it. But when something like this happens, we need to think outside the box in terms of how we're going to market our community to different people in a different way.
You've been very outspoken about the tariff situation, but you've also been an advocate for the environment and natural resources across Maine.
Yes.
Tell me why that is something that's so important to you.
Well, thank you so much for that question. I had served 6 years on the Environment and Natural Resources Committee and most previously had been chair of that committee. One of the very first bills that I put in the legislature when I was newly elected was called an Act to Protect Maine's Beaches and Shoreline, because it was abundantly clear to me that without our beach, we do not have an economy. And we need to do everything that we can to protect our beach and shoreline so that we can attract people to come and enjoy the beauty of our natural resources.
We're going to take a brief pause, but when we return, we'll pick up our conversation with Representative Lori Gramlich as she tours us around Old Orchard Beach. Stay with us. Representative Gramlich and I have moved now to the Point of View Inn, where we're speaking with the owner, Sterling Morse, about how his business has been impacted. Let's go to start with Sterling. Tell me about this beautiful inn we're in right now. I understand you're celebrating a very special milestone.
Yes, yeah, this is going to be our 50th year as a family business, yeah.
Excellent. And tell me more about how this came to the family and how long you've been operating and how it's kind of changed through the years.
Well, this original building was built as a religious retreat for the Presbyterians, and then at some point, maybe in the 30s, it became a private enterprise, which was the Point of View. It's gone through 2 ownership since then, and my mother bought this place in 1975 from a lovely French woman, Madame Goulet.
So this has been in the family?
Yes.
Yeah. What does it mean to you?
It's where I grew up. It's incredibly special to me. The fact that I'm this close to the beach, has such fond memories for myself. And growing up in this business, the friendships, the clients that you have met through the years, we've all grown up together with. It's an incredible bond.
We're entering the summer travel season. How are your bookings looking right now?
They are looking slightly more positive than they were about 2 months ago. A lot of factors are sort of coming into play. It hasn't been a complete reversal of fortunes from, say, where it was, at the end of February, beginning of March.
Sure, let's talk a little more about that because Old Orchard Beach really relies heavily on Canadian tourists. Would you say the same for the inn?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. I may be slightly different from, say, the hotel right next door or any of the other business. That the fact that my percentage of clients are being French Canadian is so heavy. It's such a large number of people because that's how over the past 50 years it's just sort of organically grown to be, say, 90% of my business.
And I understand you received some calls a few months ago from people canceling their reservations. What were they telling you? What were the Canadians telling you?
Well, it was more than a few, but the cancellations really started to come into play, I'd say, about 10 days after the inauguration, because there was a lot of rhetoric that was coming out of the administration that was, sort of very derogatory towards Canada and the Canadian people, and they were taking it, they were taking it quite personally, and justifiably so.
And how you mentioned earlier that it's looking a little better than you thought it was going to be. What are we looking at now for your summer? How does it compare to last summer?
From as a snapshot from where I was at this particular time last summer to now, I'm still down. I'm probably down at least 50-60%. Things are trending more positive. It's not to say that all wounds have been healed, but people are able to move forward. A lot of the minds that I've changed Canadian-wise, it's because they've been coming here for decades, and they're not just clients, they're friends, and the time that we share here, it's tradition.
Representative, let me bring you in now. Let's talk about what he's saying, and really national pride, Canadian national pride plays into tourism here across Maine and Old Orchard Beach. What can the state do? What can be done to make sure our friends to the north know that they are welcomed here and they're still our friends?
Well, thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for the question. Interestingly enough, just last week, Governor Mills launched a series of roundtable conversations with many coastal communities and business leaders in coastal communities to talk about what can we do to attract our Canadian friends. And so she's launched an initiative. You might have seen some of the signs welcoming Canadians. There was one right as soon as you drove into Old Orchard Beach, and they'll be at all of the borders, letting our Canadian friends know that they are welcome here in Maine. Like Sterling said, we have a long history and long tradition with our friends north of the border. And we know that we get somewhere in the neighborhood, in Old Orchard Beach specifically, of about 40% of our tourists are from Canada. And so we are keenly aware of the implications that this can have on our economy. And there's a ripple effect. So when people come here to lodge, they also come to eat. When they come to eat, they have to have food. And if they're not coming to eat, we're having, some of the bigger food distribution centers being impacted. Certainly we appreciate the good weather, but if it's raining, they're not going to go to the outlets. It's going to have a significant ripple effect. So we're trying to just be more deliberate. We've worked closely with the Office of Tourism. We know that last year, the state of Maine realized somewhere in the neighborhood of $9 billion of tourism money that came across the board. And of that, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 800,000 were Canadians, somewhere in the neighborhood of $500 million that the state of Maine realized from our Canadian friends. And Old Orchard Beach specifically has a very, very long history with Quebec and New Brunswick primarily. And just for me personally, when I heard the previous Prime Minister specifically mention Old Orchard Beach, I knew that we really had to do something. I personally have reached out to our local Chamber of Commerce to see what the Chamber's doing, how we can think about the ways in which we market Old Orchard Beach that might be different from what we used to do, broadening our scope just outside of New England. I've met with our Maine State Chamber of Commerce to see are there initiatives that we can do to help, kind of foster those relationships, because as Sterling said, it's relational. And so if we can kind of try to hone in on those relationships, hopefully some of our Canadian friends and visitors will come back.
Are you hearing similar stories that like Sterling is telling us about, business being down, bookings being down? Are you hearing that across your district?
Absolutely, 100%. When we're up in session, it's hard because we're pretty consumed up in Augusta, but I always try to, come down, touch base with businesses. People certainly unsolicited reach out to me. I heard from one business owner who owns a campground that their reservations from February 1st to the end of March of 24 to that same time frame in 25, their reservations were down 82%. And their cancellations for that same time frame were up 500%. That is significant, and that's just one business. When you have a business plan, you need predictability. And what we've seen out of this administration is a daily barrage of unpredictability. It's very difficult to hone in on your business plan when you don't know when the next shoe is going to drop. And unfortunately, that is what we have seen with this administration.
More on the impact of the tariff war coming up after the break. But first, there's a new initiative to help make our Canadian friends feel a bit more welcome and hopefully encourage travel. These signs, the first of which was installed in Old Orchard Beach, are being placed at border crossings. Governor Mills saying they cannot stop harmful rhetoric from Washington, but the state can send a message that we value and respect our neighbors. Businesses are also being given similar posters as they try and wade through uncertain times. Welcome back to In Focus. During the summer, Old Orchard Beach is a busy destination. There are about 9,000 permanent residents, but during the peak season, the population typically swells upwards of 75,000, with a large Canadian contingent. It's a major benefit to the local economy and is something that hotels, restaurants, and shops have come to rely on. But things are different this year. Tariffs at the federal level are trickling down, impacting travel and prices on pretty much everything. Joining us now is Pat Woodcock, the president and CEO of the Maine Chamber. Pat, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thank you for having us.
Of course. So let's talk about Old Orchard Beach. You know, it relies heavily on tourism, especially tourists from Canada. What have you seen since all the tariff talks began?
Well, it's a proud tradition that Old Orchard Beach has with Canadian tourism. It's the quickest way to a sand beach from Quebec City and Montreal. It's a long-standing family tradition to make the trek to Maine and Old Orchard Beach. I think all of us had a lot of trepidation when we started to see bilateral relations, especially in the first quarter, start to erode. And I think a lot of businesses immediately started questioning, you know, will this put our business plans into jeopardy? Will we start to have an erosion of Canadian tourism to Maine and to this Canadian popular attraction?
Right.
Since that time, I really think there has been a de-escalation between our bilateral relations, the Canadian election behind us, a pause on the tariffs, and moreover, I think it has revealed that some of the relationships that Canada has with Old Orchard Beach are beyond just a relationship with the United States. It's a relationship they have with this community. It's a relationship they have with businesses, and thankfully the anecdotal evidence that we have from Memorial Day weekend was that it was a strong weekend overall and a strong weekend in Old Orchard Beach.
So perhaps some of the fears you had maybe a few months ago are not coming to fruition.
You know, I think Maine tourism, it's in our DNA to have some awareness of what the risks are. You're not a good business unless you're assessing what the challenges could be. There are other macroeconomic factors, inflation, the Canadian dollar. A lot of factors go into a decision of, you know, are you going to come to Maine and are you going to be spending your limited discretionary dollars in this state? So I think there are a lot of concerns about the overall economy over the next year or two. But I do think that perhaps our worst fears of a suspension of tourism from Canada may have are not being realized as the tourism season starts.
Sure. Put it in perspective for me. How much tourism from Canada does Maine really see? I mean, do you have numbers that you can break down?
Well, first of all, largest industry for the state, $8 billion into the economy. And although Canada is a small percentage of our overall tourism, it's about 5% of visitors, it really has a profound impact disproportionately in specific communities. Bar Harbor, Old Orchard Beach, areas by the border. So that 5% number, I think, belies its importance on specific businesses.
What can the state do to reach out to those Canadian tourists to say, you know, we're your friends and we welcome you?
Well, you know, I have my counterparts and we have a shared regional economy. I think we are starting to explore how to communicate of what are the trade issues between the United States and Canada. There are always issues. With an economy so integrated between U.S. and Canada, there are going to be disputes, whether it's fisheries, the lumber industry, and I think focusing on the substance of those issues and making sure that my counterparts are working to address those. I do think we are constantly working on our digital marketing for the state, trying to ensure that people understand that they are going to be welcomed in the United States. They're going to be welcomed here in Old Orchard Beach. And moreover, I think there's a listening phase. I think we have to respect that, it has been a challenging period for a lot of Canadians, and respecting that, and spending a little time going to Canada and making sure that this is a bilateral relationship that works for them and works for us.
Do you feel that the relations have been tarnished beyond repair, or is that a little too dramatic?
I think there's a bilateral relationship with the United States and Canada that I think is improving. I do think that if the global economy is going to be successful, it starts with a U.S. Canadian economic integration. That's not only for our economy, but for our security apparatus. Secondly, there's the relationship with New England and Quebec and the maritime provinces. I still think that is robust, strong. We hosted an event with the Prince Edward Island Premier, and I do think that it's a relationship that has revealed itself that we can't take for granted. And I do think that ultimately we have the opportunity to make a stronger relationship bilaterally with the states and the provinces through this challenging first half of 2025. It really is one of those industries that I think Maine expects that we'll always have visitors, and I think that's the wrong mentality. How can we grow? How can we expand? And how can we make sure that people have an experience that they promote with their friends and colleagues?
Tell me, in your opinion, what makes Old Orchard Beach so wonderful?
I think it's the history. I think it's proximity. You can easily make this into a trip to Boston, a trip to Portland. But I think it's a tradition that a lot of families have been doing, not just for one generation, but they have a relationship that perseveres through generations, that really marks a period where people can have a moment to kind of forget about where they are and just settle right into a complete relaxing moment enjoying the Atlantic Ocean.
Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
I want to thank all of our guests for joining us today. I also want to thank you for spending part of your day with us. I'm Robert Guadarrama in beautiful Old Orchard Beach. I'll see you next time on In Focus Maine.